Well, good morning, girls and boys, and hey, welcome to devotion time today. I hope you're having a good day. I'm having a pretty good day so far. I've had a good breakfast, a good trip to work, so overall, I'm doing all right. But I'm really excited to see what we're going to be learning this morning in our devotion time together. Now, if I can cast your memory back a few weeks' time to our module assembly. That's right, this big assembly we had at Werribee Baptist Church with grade 3 through to grade 6. I think Judson led that assembly, am I correct? Yes, that was a Judson assembly. And in our learning from the Bible time, we learnt about trusting in God, what it means to trust in God. And one of the characters I briefly mentioned was the character of Abraham. And I said that I would take some time in a couple of weeks' time to follow up on a little bit more information and a bit of a study on Abraham and how exactly he trusted in God. So, Abraham. Who's Abraham? Some of you may know who Abraham is. Maybe you've heard his name before. Some of you may not have any idea who Abraham was, but we can find his story in the Bible. That's right, in the Bible. I've got my finger in the page. Now, does anyone know where the life of Abraham can be found in the Bible?
Psst, Genesis!
Yep, that's right. The book of Genesis. Genesis is the first book of the Bible, so it's not that hard to remember in case you want to look up the life of Abraham. And his story begins in chapter 12 and it goes all the way through to about chapter 25, chapter 26. So that's a lot of chapters on just one character from the Bible. I can't think of too many more that have more chapters in the Bible on their life. So why is Abraham so important and how did he trust in God? Well, there's actually 3 ways that Abraham demonstrated great, awesome trust in God. So let's take some time and have a look at them. But before we do, some of you might notice something a little bit different about this video than previous videos or devotions that I've made. That's right. Some really great friends of mine in grade 5 recommended that I try editing my devotional videos on CapCut. That's right, on CapCut. So I've downloaded CapCut on my Samsung Galaxy phone. That's right, I'm a Samsung guy. Sorry for all those iPhone and Apple fans. But I thought I would give it a go, editing my devotion on CapCut. So I hope I've done a good job. Okay, now, let's look at the first way that Abraham trusted in God. Number 1, Abraham lived in a place named Ur. That's right, Ur. Can you say that word? Ur. It may sound like you're trying to expel something from your body. That's a bit gross in the morning, Mr. Bear, I know, but Ur. You are. Now, Abraham lived with his family in Ur. Mom and a dad, uncles and aunties. He even had a job making idols. That's right, he made objects for people to worship. So Abraham wasn't necessarily thinking about the one true God. But at this time, God called on Abraham.
Hey, Abraham! Listen up!
Yeah, okay, something like that. God called on Abraham to follow him. God called Abraham to leave Ur, the country where his family was from, to go and populate and to live in another place. Abraham looked up at God and he said, okay. That's right, Abraham trusted in God. He knew that there was something different about this one true God than the idols that he's been making. So Abraham left his land. He traveled afar across a dangerous place, and he finally came to his own land that God gave Abraham and his descendants. But you see, when Abraham got to this promised land, God told Abraham that he would have a family, his own family, that Abraham and his wife Sarah, awesome names, would have a family. But Abraham and Sarah, they were getting old and they didn't have kids. And the older you get, the more hard it is to have kids. So Abraham was like to God, how do I know I'm going to have kids? And God promised Abraham this, that even though he was old, God promised, you will have more children. The generations that will come from you will be great. Great like all the stars in the world. That's right. When Abraham was in this new land, in the promised land, he would have looked up to the stars, all the bright, shining stars. And that was a way for him to remember that God promised him that he would start a family. So, number 2, the second way Abraham trusted in God was to believe that God's promises would be true and that Abraham and Sarah would have a baby. And after some time, God's promise didn't happen straight away. But many years later, when they were even more older, it would seem that it would be impossible for Abraham and Sarah to have babies. Have a think about the oldest person you know. Maybe it's a great-grandma or a great-grandpa. Maybe it's a family friend. Can you imagine them having a baby at that age? It seems impossible. But girls and boys, nothing is impossible with God. So Sarah became pregnant and Abraham was the father, and they had a child. Abraham and Sarah trusted that God could provide a child that would last generations. Many generations would come from them. And the child's name was Isaac. That's right. And Isaac means, I think Isaac means the word laughter. And Isaac means laughter because when Sarah heard that she was going to have a baby, she laughed. She laughed, but Abraham trusted in God and his promises. The third way Abraham trusted in God was this. Abraham trusted that God could even raise dead people. That's right. And Abraham also trusted in God's promises. You see, there's a story in Genesis chapter 22 where God actually tests Abraham. Remember, God is trustworthy, but he still will test us. And God told Abraham this, to take his only son that he had, that's right, Isaac, and to sacrifice him onto God. Now we can just pause there and we can have like a full discussion of what God was wanting Abraham to do by sacrificing his own son. But maybe as we come up to Easter, we can begin to think about what it means to sacrifice a son. Jesus Christ is God's own son. And I think it's an image of that. But anyway, God asked Abraham to take his son Isaac up a high mountain and to sacrifice him. That's right. And Abraham trusted in God to do this. So Abraham went up. It would have been very hard for him. He wouldn't have been looking forward to it, that's for sure. But just before he was about to sacrifice his only loved son, God told him, "Stop. You don't need to do that. I was testing you to see how much, Abraham, you trusted me." You see, Abraham trusted in God so much that even God was surprised with the trust. Okay, so they are the 3 ways that Abraham trusted in God. He trusted in God to move from his own country and to follow God where he would start a brand new family. Secondly, he trusted that God would provide a child for him, just one, Isaac. And third, Abraham trusted that God could even raise the dead. So, that's a little bit more about Abraham. We've covered his story very quickly, but hey, I hope you have a great day today and thank you for tuning in to this devotion. Maybe you can come up and let me know what you thought about the devotion and my new editing on CapCut. And maybe you can also let me know, what are some things that you currently trust in? What are some things that are currently challenging your trust? I'd love to hear about it. See ya.